When we picture the Buddha, we often imagine a perfectly serene statue. But the story begins with a fragile human mind, one deliberately sealed away in an engineered reality designed to hide the truth of existence. In the Himalayan foothills, the birth of Prince Siddhartha Gautama brought a heavy prophecy to his father. An astrologer predicted the boy would walk one of two paths. He would either become a world-conquering emperor, or he would abandon it all to become a spiritual wanderer who discovers a path to end suffering. King Shuddhodana wanted the emperor. To manipulate fate, he decided his son would never have a reason to leave. The king built 3 distinct, opulent palaces, one for each season, to immerse the prince in a seamless, forced loop of pleasure. The king enforced a strict censorship to maintain this environment. He removed anyone elderly or sick from the palace walls. Even wilting flowers were swiftly cleared from the prince's sight. Siddhartha's world was curated to project an illusion of permanent youth. This lack of struggle eventually worked against the king's plan. Because Siddhartha was provided with every indulgence, he began to see the repetition in it. He noticed that even the most beautiful music eventually ended, and every feast left him empty again. This led him to a persistent, logical question. If this joy was so perfect, why did it feel so fragile and temporary? By age 29, the curiosity became an insistence. Siddhartha demanded his charioteer take him outside the palace walls to observe the actual kingdom. On the streets of his own city, his understanding of life was confronted by 3 facts he had never been allowed to see: an old man bent with age, a person ravaged by disease, and a corpse. Siddhartha realized that his own body and the bodies of everyone he loved were subject to the same decay. Finally, he saw a 4th figure, a wandering ascetic. This man possessed a quiet composure, despite the reality of mortality. To Siddhartha, this suggested that a way to live without being paralyzed by the fear of death might actually exist. That night, Siddhartha made a decision. He walked to the royal chambers, looked at his sleeping wife, Yashodhara, and his newborn son, Rahul, one last time, and departed the palace under the cover of midnight. This departure was driven by Maha Karuna, or great compassion. Siddhartha believed that if he stayed, he would only watch his family wither. He left to find a specific, repeatable method to address the universal problem of human suffering. Siddhartha first tested the meditative technologies of the era. He mastered the deepest states of trance under renowned teachers, but found that the peace ended the moment he opened his eyes. These states were temporary escapes, not a permanent solution. He then turned to the extreme opposite of his royal life. For 6 years in the forests of Uruvela, he attempted to conquer his mind by punishing his body, starving himself until he could feel his spine through his stomach. This path of self-torture nearly killed him. Weakened by hunger, he nearly drowned in the Niranjana River, barely pulling himself to the bank. While recovering, he recalled a simple physical principle. If the strings of a lute are too loose, they cannot play. If they are pulled too tight, they break. He deduced that the same logic applied to the mind. Only a body in balance, neither indulged nor tortured, can support the clarity needed for deep analysis. This realization of the middle way was a practical shift. Siddhartha understood that his physical form was a tool for his inquiry. To destroy the tool through starvation was as illogical as pampering it through luxury. He accepted a bowl of rice to regain his strength and sat beneath a Bodhi tree. He vowed that he would not rise until he understood the mechanics of how the mind creates its own pain. Legend describes this as a battle with a demon named Mara, but the specific challenges he faced, craving, fear, and ego, were the internal projections of his own mind. He was fighting his own evolutionary programming to stay comfortable and afraid. When his internal doubts questioned his right to seek such a deep truth, Siddhartha lowered his right hand to touch the earth. This gesture, the Bhumisparsha Mudra, was his silent assertion that his pursuit was grounded in reality, not ego. In the quiet that followed, he identified the process of dependent origination. He saw that suffering is not an inevitable fate, but a chain reaction triggered by our ignorance of how things actually change. At age 35, Siddhartha became the Buddha, or the Awakened One. He had mapped the internal architecture of human discontent. Siddhartha traveled to Sarnath to find the 5 companions who had fasted with him. They initially viewed him with deep contempt, believing he had abandoned the spiritual path because he had started eating again. He presented his new findings not merely as a set of beliefs, but as a diagnosis and a treatment plan. He called these the 4 Noble Truths, identifying the presence of suffering, its cause in our attachments, the fact that these attachments can be ended, and the specific 8-fold path to do it. His companions had spent years trying to reach clarity through pain, only to find themselves exhausted. When they finally heard this systematic approach, they recognized that it addressed the very mental friction they were currently experiencing. This clarity led to the first group of followers, known as the Sangha. He demonstrated clearly that what we call the self is actually a collection of changing parts: body, feelings, and thoughts. By showing that none of these parts are permanent, he helped his followers see that clinging to a rigid identity was the primary source of their anxiety. The Buddha did not ask for faith. He acted as a physician, offering a method that his followers could test and verify through their own mental observations. This approach spread rapidly. Over 1,000 fire-worshipping ascetics abandoned their rituals to join him, replacing their complex sacrifices with a focus on mental discipline and ethical conduct. He eventually returned to Kapilavastu. The former prince, who was expected to rule as a king, instead walked the streets with a beggar's bowl, eventually teaching his father and his son the same methods he had discovered in the forest. He later made a highly significant social decision by officially allowing his foster mother to establish an order for women. He stated that women were fully capable of achieving the same mental clarity as men, a direct challenge to the patriarchal structures of the time. For 45 years, he traveled and taught, refining a system designed to help people navigate the inherent difficulties of being human. The work of Siddhartha Gautama remains as a practical, psychological roadmap. By treating the mind as a subject of empirical study, he provided a way to find internal stability that is still being tested and practiced today.